slow process which we call active measures. The first stage being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. The next stage is destabilization. What matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. The next stage is crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, period of normalization. This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C., who will promise lots of things, never mind.
What you just heard was a speech from a former KGB officer talking about misinformation and corruption in the United States way back during the Cold War. Misinformation that was as prevalent just as then as it is now. The U.S. entered and left the Vietnam War for two reasons: disinformation and power. The spark that lit the war was the so-called Bay of Tonkin incident that allegedly took place between the U.S. and North Vietnamese Navy. It started as a minor skirmish but was blown out of proportion by the U.S. government as an excuse to expand the war. The Secretary of Defense at the time, Robert McNamara, admitted that there was no attack. Using this false event, President Johnson was able to use false information to manipulate Congress's judgment to secure a blank check called the Bay of Tonkin Resolution, which gave President Johnson the unconditional power to wage a war all the way across the world. The war, as we know it, didn't exactly go well. Thousands of lives were lost and nothing was accomplished. President Richard Nixon put in the plans for Vietnamization of the war by expanding the South Vietnamese army to fight the war themselves and have the U.S. withdraw. Around the same time, the Pentagon Papers were leaked by the previously mentioned Secretary McNamara to the New York Times, revealing that the Johnson administration lied to Congress and to the American public, and that the war was being expanded in secret before the incident even occurred. This eventually led the United States to leave the war fully, signing the Paris Peace Accords in 1973, believing that the North Vietnamese would not invade the South again. Right after we left, they invaded again. Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, fell in 1975, with the U.S. using helicopters to get out civilians and key personnel out of the country. Vietnam was lost, and we gained nothing forward. From that day forward, the American people were determined to never, ever get involved in a pointless war on the other side of the world ever again.
Did we get on that? I had one.
On September 11, 2001, America's worst nightmare became a reality. Terrorists attacked sites in New York City, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C.
And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
The attacks sparked a 10-year battle which came to be known as the War on Terror.
On September 11, 2001, the United States was attacked by terrorists. The terrorists were from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE, and Lebanon, 15 of which were from Saudi Arabia. So naturally, we went to war with Afghanistan. The government also used the fear and misinformation from the attack to manipulate people's judgment to pass the Patriot Act, which increased government surveillance and allowed certain agencies to operate without warrants, similarly to how they used misinformation to pass the Tonkin Revolution during the Vietnam War. Afghanistan was rumored to be holding members of al-Qaeda, including Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the attack. It took 10 more years of fighting, which was backed by misleading metrics of success and progress until bin Laden was found, who is not in Afghanistan at all, but in Pakistan. But we did not leave Afghanistan in 2011. No, we were there for 10 more years under the guise of peacekeeping until 2021. That was when we signed a joint declaration with Afghanistan to leave the country fully, under the impression that the Taliban would not seize control of the government upon U.S. withdrawal, and that the Afghan government was strong enough to prevent that from happening if it were to happen. Both statements, just like how it was in Vietnam, were false. Upon leaving, the Taliban instantly took control of the country.
chaos, as you can see in this video. At least 2 people died when hundreds of Afghans rushed the tarmac, holding on to an American military plane as it took off.
American troops cannot and should not be fighting in a war and dying in a war that Afghan forces are not willing to fight for themselves.
Tonight, about 100 remaining U.S. Embassy staff have been evacuated to the airport. At least 5,000 U.S. troops, including soldiers from in our area, Fort Bragg, are expected to be on the ground within the next 24 hours.
What we could gather from both of these events, past and present, is that the government manipulated and spread false information in order to impact our judgment to gain power. The Vietnam and Afghan wars serve as stark reminders to how misinformation could shape our judgment and decision-making, often with devastating consequences. People used fear and misinformation to pass unconstitutional laws because the truth was warped in order to change people's judgment. Both conflicts were marked with dissemination of false or misleading information, which played a crucial role in their initiation, escalation, and eventual outcomes. In the Vietnam War, the exaggerated reports of the Gulf of Tonkin incident were used to justify the escalation of involvement, leading to widespread public support that later turned into disillusionment as the truth emerged. Similarly, the decision to invade Afghanistan post 9/11 was based off of the belief that it harbored the terrorists responsible for the attacks. These wars underscore the importance of critically evaluating and judging information, especially from official sources, and the need for governments to prioritize transparency and accountability to maintain public trust. Understanding the past instances of misinformation can help prevent similar mistakes in the future, guiding us in fostering a more informed and reasonable approach to the information we receive, and ultimately leading to more responsible and effective decision-making.